We often talk about depression as something that happens in our minds, a mood or a feeling. But what if I told you it's much more than that? It's a condition that can physically change our most vital organ, the brain. Today, we're going to break down exactly how that happens, what it means, and most importantly, the path to recovery.
Let's just dive right in with a pretty startling fact. Years and years of research have shown that long-term depression can actually cause a loss of gray matter. In other words, it can literally shrink parts of your brain. And no, that's not a metaphor, it's a real physical change.
So, first things first, let's talk consequences. What does this remodeling of the brain actually look like? What are the tangible effects?
Well, these physical effects create a whole cascade of problems. It's not just the brain shrinkage. Depression can also trigger inflammation, which is really damaging to brain cells. And this leads directly to those cognitive symptoms you hear about, like finding it impossible to focus or just feeling like your thinking has slowed way down.
And to put that brain shrinkage into perspective for you, check out this number. Some studies have found that the hippocampus, which is a super important area for memory and learning, can shrink by as much as 8 to 19% in people with long-term depression. I mean, that is a massive physical impact.
So the big question is, why? Why does this happen? What's actually going on under the hood that's driving these pretty scary changes inside the brain?
All right, let's go inside the brain. We're going to take a look at the key areas that are really put under enormous stress during depression.
So, first up is the hippocampus. You can think of this as your brain's librarian or its memory hub. The thing is, it's incredibly sensitive to cortisol, the main stress hormone. When you're dealing with chronic depression, your brain is basically flooded with cortisol, and that's toxic to the nerve cells there. It causes them to wither away, and that is what leads to the shrinkage we were just talking about. And then we have the prefrontal cortex. This is your brain's CEO, the command center. It's in charge of all the high-level stuff, planning, making decisions, keeping your emotions in check. What research shows is that in depression, not only does its activity go down, but it can physically get thinner. And that directly messes with your ability to regulate your feelings and think clearly.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. A healthy prefrontal cortex helps you plan things out, make good decisions, and manage your emotions. But when it's impaired by depression, all of that starts to break down. It's so important to understand this isn't a lack of willpower. It's a physical change in how the brain is functioning.
Okay, so let's talk about the brain's communication network. Neurotransmitters are basically the chemical messengers, the texts, that let your brain cells talk to each other. With depression, this entire intricate system can get thrown completely out of whack, and that disrupts everything from your mood to your motivation and energy levels.
Let's break down the three big players here. You've got serotonin. That's the mood regulator. When it drops, you get those persistent feelings of sadness. Then there's norepinephrine, which handles alertness. When those levels are low, it results in that deep, profound fatigue. And finally, dopamine, the reward chemical. A deficit there is what robs a person of their ability to feel any pleasure or motivation.
So we've seen the physical changes, we've seen the chemical imbalances. Now, let's connect the dots. Let's really link all of this science to the everyday symptoms people with depression experience.
This is where it all clicks into place. That shrinking hippocampus we talked about, that's why memory gets so foggy. The impaired prefrontal cortex, that is the root of why it's so hard to concentrate or make a decision. The chemical imbalance is the biological reason for the deep sadness and that feeling of getting no joy out of anything. And, that chronic brain inflammation just makes everything feel so much worse.
So if there's one thing to really take away from all this, it's this. Depression is a physical illness. It is not a character flaw. It is not something someone can just snap out of. It causes real, measurable changes to the brain that fundamentally impacts how a person is able to think, feel, and act.
This, right here, is probably the most important question. After seeing all this evidence, it's completely natural to wonder, is this damage permanent?
And that brings us to our final and honestly most hopeful section. Because the story doesn't end with damage. Not at all. The brain has this absolutely incredible capacity to heal itself. So thankfully, the answer is no. These changes aren't necessarily permanent. Our brains have this amazing superpower called neuroplasticity. It's the ability to reorganize, to form new connections, and to heal. With the right treatment, these changes can be stopped and in many cases, even reversed. So how do we tap into that healing power? Well, it's usually a team effort. You've got therapy like CBT, which literally helps rewire the brain's negative thought patterns.
You have medications that can work to correct those chemical imbalances and bring down inflammation. And then you have a healthy lifestyle, which provides the essential building blocks the brain needs to recover.
And really, we can't overstate the power of these lifestyle choices. Things like regular exercise, a good diet, getting enough sleep, reducing stress with mindfulness or yoga, and maintaining strong social connections, these are all scientifically proven ways to support brain health and are powerful tools in preventing and treating depression.
So, we've seen how deeply depression can change the brain, but we've also seen that our brains have this amazing power to heal. It really leaves us with one final thought. Understanding that these changes are physical is the first step toward fighting stigma and really prioritizing our mental health, for ourselves and for everyone around us. Your brain is precious. So, the question is, are you ready to protect it?
Health is the most precious gift. If this video helped you or someone you love, please like, subscribe, and share so more families can stay safe and healthy.